The rehabilitation center on Zephyr Prime was quiet except for the soft hum of medical equipment and the gentle clicking of Kethver's breathing apparatus. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Where alien veterans moved slowly between therapy sessions, some walked on mechanical legs, others guided floating chairs with their minds, all of them carrying invisible wounds that ran deeper than missing limbs. Kethver sat in his favorite corner chair, the one that faced the garden where human and alien children played together. His cybernetic arm rested on the table, its metal fingers occasionally twitching as old neural pathways misfired. The prosthetic leg beneath the table was newer, more advanced than his arm, but he still felt phantom pain where flesh had once been. A young Terran filmmaker named Lisa Chen approached his table, her recording equipment floating beside her on a small hover platform. She had kind eyes, the sort that Kethver had learned to associate with humans who genuinely wanted to understand rather than simply document trauma for entertainment. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me, Veteran Kethver," she said, settling into the chair across from him. "I know these memories are difficult." Kethver's compound eyes focused on her, each lens reflecting a slightly different angle of her face. His translator hummed for a moment before converting his native clicking language into standard Galactic. "You want to know about the war," he said. "It wasn't a question. About the humans we fought. About why so many of us ended up in places like this." He gestured with his mechanical arm toward the other veterans scattered throughout the center's common area. Lisa nodded, activating her recording device. "The Coalition human war ended 20 years ago, but veteran trauma centers like this one are still full. Most species recover from conflict within a few years, but Coalition veterans seem to struggle with something different. Something deeper." A bitter sound escaped Kethver's breathing apparatus, something that might have been laughter in another species. "Different. Yes, that's one word for it." He adjusted his translator, the device mounted on his chest, clicking softly. "Do you know what Coalition Command called humans before the first battle?" "I've read the files. Primitive meat sacks was the official term." "That's right. Soft-skinned mammals who had barely learned to travel between stars. We had energy shields that could stop plasma rounds, quantum armor that made us nearly invulnerable, weapons that could turn mountains into glass." Kethver's mechanical fingers drummed against the table. They had projectile weapons that fired metal slugs and wore fabric uniforms that wouldn't stop a sharp stick. The filmmaker leaned forward. "But something changed your perspective." "Everything changed." Kethver's voice grew quiet. "We thought we understood warfare. In the Coalition, war is about resources, territory, strategic advantage. You fight until the cost becomes too high. Then you negotiate. Clean, logical, efficient." He paused, watching through the window as a human child helped an alien veteran with damaged legs reach a high shelf. The child's small hands worked alongside the veteran's remaining natural appendage with complete trust. "The first engagement was on Zarian 7, a mining colony. We sent 3 full battalions against maybe 200 human defenders. The mathematics were simple: overwhelming force, quick surrender, minimal casualties on both sides." Kethver's translator crackled as his emotional state affected his speech patterns. "We expected to be done by lunch. What happened instead?" "We met Jamie." The name seemed to cause Kethver physical pain. "A human medic, barely out of training. When our artillery started falling, he ran into the bombardment zone. Not away from it, into it. To reach wounded miners who were trapped in collapsed tunnels." Lisa checked her recording levels. "That seems, reckless." "That's what we thought. Reckless? Suicidal? Stupid." Kethver's compound eyes dimmed slightly. But Jamin wasn't being reckless. He was making a choice. The same choice every human in that colony made, over and over again. They chose each other over themselves. The veteran's mechanical arm reached for a cup of liquid that sat cooling on the table. His prosthetic fingers weren't quite calibrated correctly, and the cup trembled slightly as he lifted it. "Jamin told me something later, when we were both in a medical tent. He said humans have an old saying, a cornered rat will bite a cat. Simple words, but they stayed with me." Kethver's breathing apparatus cycled air more rapidly. "We thought we were the cats in that equation. Bigger, stronger, better armed. We thought we were hunting rats. But you weren't." "No." The word came out flat. "Final, we learned that when you corner humanity, they don't just bite, they tear your throat out, drag themselves across broken glass to reach their wounded, and keep fighting even after their hearts stop beating. They turn their own mortality into a weapon." Lisa glanced at her notes. "The reports say the conflict lasted 3 years, but most Coalition forces withdrew after 18 months. "We didn't withdraw," Kethver corrected. "We surrendered. Not because humans were stronger than us, but because we realized what we were really fighting." He set down his cup and looked directly at the filmmaker. "We weren't fighting soldiers. We were fighting a species that had weaponized love itself." The rehabilitation center grew quiet around them as afternoon shifted toward evening. Somewhere, in the distance, a therapy session ended with the soft sound of mechanical limbs powering down for the day. That's what haunts us, Kethver whispered. Not the violence, not the death. The love. Kethver's mechanical fingers traced the edge of his cup as he stared past the filmmaker toward the rehabilitation center's garden. His compound eyes reflected the afternoon light, each lens showing a different angle of memory. The translator, on his chest, hummed softly as he prepared to speak again. Zarian 7 was a dustball of a planet, he began, his voice carrying the weight of 20 years. Nothing but mining equipment and prefab shelters scattered across red dirt that got into everything. The humans had been there for 6 months when we arrived. Lisa adjusted her recording equipment, noting how Kethver's breathing apparatus cycled faster when he talked about specific battles. What was your first impression of the human settlement? Pathetic. The word came out harsh through the translator. Thin metal walls, basic atmospheric processors, children playing in the dirt between buildings. We could see everything from orbit, their defensive positions, their weapon emplacements, their escape routes. They had none of the latter. Kethver's mechanical arm whirred as he gestured toward the window. The coalition had sent 3 battalions, 9,000 soldiers with full combat gear. The humans had maybe 200 people total, and half of them were families. Engineers, botanists, teachers. A man named Dong Ho ran the mining operations with his wife Sujin. Sujin was a xeno. He continued, his voice growing softer. She studied how earth plants could grow in alien soil. When our ships appeared in their sky, she was in the greenhouse, teaching human children and a few young Centaurians about crop rotation. The filmmaker made a note. So the attack came without warning. We followed standard coalition protocol. Orbital bombardment of military targets, followed by ground assault. Clean, efficient, minimal civilian casualties. Kethver's translator clicked as his emotional state shifted. The first shells fell at dawn. Precision strikes on their communication array, their vehicle depot, their main power generator. He paused, watching a human child in the garden help an elderly Zephyrian veteran water plants. The child's small hands guided the aliens' trembling claws, both of them laughing at something only they could understand. Sujin was supposed to take the children to the emergency shelter, Kethver continued. Standard evacuation protocol. But when the bombardment started, she saw one of the Centaurian younglings get separated from the group. The little one was crying, confused, running toward the impact zone instead of away from it. Lisa leaned forward. What did she do? She ran after it. The words came out flat, matter of fact, through artillery fire, explosions throwing dirt and metal fragments everywhere. She grabbed that child and carried it to safety, then went back for 2 more who had gotten lost in the chaos. Kethver's mechanical fingers drummed against the table. I was in the second wave landing craft. We could see the bombardment from altitude. Precise, controlled, devastating. Everything went according to plan until we touched down and started the ground assault. What changed? The humans didn't surrender. His compound eyes focused on something beyond the room. They should have. Any logical species would have. We outnumbered them, 42-1. Our weapons were superior. Their defenses were destroyed. But they kept fighting. The veterans' breathing apparatus cycled air more rapidly as the memories intensified. Dong Ho organized the miners. They had industrial equipment, plasma cutters, rock haulers, drilling rigs. Things that weren't meant to be weapons but could kill you just as dead. I watched him convert a mining loader into a mobile artillery platform using spare parts and determination. His hands were shaking. He was terrified. I could smell it on him. But he kept working, kept talking to his people, kept them focused. Lisa checked her recording levels. You mentioned something called the Zarian charge in your preliminary interview. Kethver's translator made a sound like grinding metal. To charge, yes. After 6 hours of fighting, we had them cornered in the central compound. Standard siege formation, heavy weapons trained on their position. We expected surrender. Instead, Dong Ho opened the compound gates and led 67 humans in a frontal assault against our fortified positions. The memories seemed to cause him physical pain. They had converted everything into weapons. Food processors became explosive devices. Children's toys became guidance systems for improvised missiles. By every tactical manual in the galaxy, it should have been suicide. He continued. We had them outgunned, entrenched, with clear fields of fire. But they kept coming. Not in a straight line like mindless berserkers, but organized, covering each other, moving with purpose. Kethver's mechanical arm reached for his cup again, the servos whining softly. I can still hear them, not screaming in rage or bloodlust, but calling to each other. Watch your 6 Jinho, covering fire for Sujin. Keep moving. For the children. They were afraid, he said quietly. I could smell their terror, hear their hearts hammering like war drums. They weren't fearless warriors or berserkers. They were teachers and engineers and parents who had decided that some things were worth dying for. The filmmaker waited as Kethver's breathing apparatus cycled through several long breaths. When the shooting stopped, I found Dong Ho trying to patch up one of my wounded soldiers with medical supplies he'd saved from his own kit. He was bleeding from 3 different wounds, but he looked at me and said, Your boy's hurt worse than I am. Kethver's compound eyes dimmed. That's when I first heard it. The human battle cry that still wakes me at night. Not words of glory or conquest, but a promise that haunts every coalition veteran who survived that war. He looked directly at Lisa. For the ones we couldn't save. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the rehabilitation center as Kethver shifted in his chair. His mechanical leg made a soft worry sound as he adjusted his position, and Lisa noticed how his compound eyes seemed to focus on something far beyond the room's walls. The translator on his chest hummed quietly before he began to speak again. After Zarian 7, they transferred me to the Haven Station operation, Kethver said, his voice carrying a different quality now, heavier, more broken. Command said it would be simple, 3 days maximum. Secure the orbital platform, extract valuable prisoners, move on to the next target. Lisa checked her recording equipment, noting the change in the veteran's demeanor, but it didn't go according to plan. For months, Kethver replied, his mechanical fingers tapping against the table in an irregular rhythm. For months trapped in a metal box with failing life support, surrounded by humans who should have broken under the pressure, but somehow got stronger instead. He paused, watching through the window as human and alien children played together. In the garden, a small human girl was teaching a young Centaurian how to braid flower stems, both of them giggling at their clumsy attempts. Haven Station was a civilian research facility, he continued. Families lived there. Scientists, engineers, support staff. When we breached the hull, we expected to find terrified civilians ready to surrender. Instead, we found Hyan-Su. The name seemed to cause Kethver physical discomfort. His breathing apparatus cycled faster, and his translator crackled slightly, as emotional interference affected his speech patterns. Hyan-Su was a maintenance engineer. Ordinary man, nothing special about him except for 2 daughters named Mina and Soyeon, 7 and 9 years old. Kethver's compound eyes dimmed. When our assault teams broke through the outer ring, we found him in the central hub, coordinating emergency repairs while his girls played with building blocks in the corner. Lisa leaned forward. He didn't evacuate his children. There was nowhere to go. The station was surrounded, life support was failing, and escape pods had been destroyed in the initial assault. Kethver's mechanical arm reached for his cup, the servos whining softly, but Hyan-Su wasn't panicking. He was working, fixing what could be fixed, jury-rigging what couldn't, keeping the lights on for everyone trapped inside. The veteran's translator hummed as he continued. His wife Janae was in the medical bay. She was treating wounded coalition soldiers alongside human civilians. No questions asked, no sides taken, just broken people who needed help. That doesn't sound like enemy combatants, Lisa observed. That's what made it so difficult, Kethver replied. We'd been trained to fight soldiers, not families. But these families fought back in ways we'd never encountered. Not with weapons, but with organization, with purpose, with something that made them stronger than they should have been. He gestured toward the garden where the children were still playing. Hyan-Su hadn't slept in 72 hours, but he was sharing his food rations with alien children, whose parents had died in the fighting. Janae was performing surgery on coalition troops while her own daughters helped by sterilizing medical instruments. Kethver's breathing apparatus made a sound like a sigh. The humans organized everything. Work shifts, food distribution, defense rotations. But it wasn't military efficiency that terrified us. It was watching parents like Hyan-Su tell bedtime stories to their children while planning which emergency repairs would expose them to lethal radiation. The reactor core was failing, he continued, his voice growing quieter. Without it, life support would shut down completely. Everyone would die, human, coalition, civilian, military. It didn't matter, the mathematics were simple. Someone had to go into the reactor chamber and manually reset the cooling system. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. That would be a death sentence. Yes, 6 people volunteered immediately. All humans. They drew lots to see who would go. Kethver's translator made a grinding sound. The winners included Janae, 2 engineers, and a teenage boy named Taimin, who lied about his age to get on the volunteer list. The veterans' mechanical fingers stopped their rhythmic tapping. They spent their last hour teaching other people how to do their jobs. Janae showed the remaining medics how to treat radiation poisoning. The engineers explained how to maintain the backup systems. Taimin recorded video messages for his parents back on Earth. They were laughing, Kethver said, his voice barely above a whisper, making jokes about who would die first, taking bets on whether the radiation would kill them before the heat did. They were terrified, I could smell their fear, but they were laughing. Through the window, the human girl in the garden had successfully taught the Centaurian child how to make a flower crown. They were placing it on the head of an elderly Zephyrian veteran who was pretending to be honored by the gift. Mina asked her mother why she had to go, Kethver continued. Janae knelt down and took her daughter's hands. She said, because if Mama doesn't fix the scary machine, everyone's lights go out forever. And Mama loves everyone's lights. The translator crackled with static as Kethver's emotional state intensified. She kissed both her daughters goodbye, told them to be good for daddy, and walked into that reactor chamber like she was going to work. Just another day at the office. Did she succeed? All 6 of them did. They saved the station, saved 3,000 lives. Coalition and human alike. Kethver's compound eyes reflected the garden's light. But watching Janae disappear into that chamber, seeing Hyansu try to explain to his daughters why Mama wasn't coming home, that's when we understood what we were really fighting. He looked directly at Lisa. Humans don't fight wars. They sacrifice themselves on altars made of other people's survival. And that kind of love, it's a weapon more terrifying than any technology we ever developed. The rehabilitation center had grown quieter as evening approached, with most of the day patients returning to their homes. Kethver remained in his corner chair, his mechanical arm resting on the table while his compound eyes tracked the movements of staff members preparing for the night shift. The translator on his chest hummed softly as he prepared to continue his story. After Haven Station, everything changed for me, he said, his voice carrying a different weight now. Command reassigned me to intelligence gathering. They wanted to understand how humans were adapting their technology so quickly, turning civilian equipment into military assets. Lisa adjusted her recording equipment, noting how Kethver's breathing apparatus had settled into a steadier rhythm. You became a specialist in human tactics. I became a student of human creativity, he corrected. And creativity, when applied to warfare by a species fighting for survival, becomes something else entirely. Something that still gives me nightmares. The veteran's mechanical fingers traced patterns on the table surface as he spoke. My first assignment was Titan 7, an agricultural world where humans had established farming colonies. Simple people, growing food for the outer settlements. Teachers, farmers, families. Nothing threatening about them. Until the coalition blockade cut off their supply lines, Kethver continued. Then we watched those simple farmers transform into something we'd never encountered before. Led by a teacher named Biora, they turned their entire world into a weapon. Through the window, the last of the garden's lights were coming on, casting a warm glow over the plants that human and alien children had tended together. Kethver watched a maintenance worker, human, he noted, carefully adjust the watering system that kept the diverse collection of plants from dozens of worlds alive in the same soil. Biora taught elementary school before the war, he said. She knew how to explain complex ideas in simple terms, how to organize children, how to make learning fun, skills that seemed harmless until she started teaching adults how to convert farming equipment into weapons of war. Lisa leaned forward. What kind of weapons? Crop harvesters became mobile artillery platforms. The rotating blades were replaced with plasma cutters, the grain storage compartments filled with explosive charges. Kethver's translator crackled slightly. Irrigation systems became delivery mechanisms for chemical weapons, synthesized from common fertilizers. Even children's toys were modified into surveillance drones. The veteran's compound eyes dimmed as he recalled the memories. But it wasn't the weapons themselves that terrified us. It was the process. The way humans approached problems, they would look at an object and see not what it was, but what it could become. I watched a farmer named Junho turn a food processing plant into a munitions factory using nothing but spare parts and determination. His 8-year-old daughter helped by sorting components while he worked, treating it like a game. She didn't understand she was helping build devices that would kill coalition soldiers. Kethver's mechanical arm reached for his cup, the servos whining softly in the quiet room. The worst part was their efficiency. Humans didn't waste resources on elaborate weapons. They built exactly what they needed, when they needed it, using whatever materials were available. That sounds like standard wartime adaptation, Lisa observed. No, Kethver replied firmly. Standard adaptation is upgrading existing systems, improving known technologies. What humans did was fundamental transformation. They saw connections between disparate systems that our best tactical analysts missed. The veteran's breathing apparatus cycled through several breaths before he continued. Then came Kepler 4 for to be, where I lost this leg. That's where I met Tejo. The name seemed to cause Kethver physical discomfort. His translator made a grinding sound as his emotional state shifted, and his compound eyes focused on something beyond the room's walls. Tejo was a communications specialist. Nothing special about him, average height, quiet personality, the kind of soldier who followed orders and tried to stay alive. But when his unit got pinned down by coalition forces, he did something that still haunts me. Lisa checked her recording levels, noting the change in the veteran's voice. What happened? Artillery barrage caught them in the open. Tejo was trapped under debris, both legs crushed, internal injuries that should have killed him within minutes. But he didn't die. He couldn't die. His squad was still out there, cut off from command, taking fire from positions they couldn't identify. Kethver's mechanical fingers drummed against the table, so he turned himself into a living communication relay, rigged his helmet communicator to his suit's power supply, patched into the local network using components from destroyed equipment around him. For 6 hours, He coordinated artillery strikes while his body shut down. 6 hours. Lisa's voice carried disbelief. 6 hours. Conscious for the first 3, unconscious but still transmitting for the last 3. His biometrics showed his heart stopped twice, but somehow he kept working. The veteran's translator crackled with static. When we finally reached his position, he was unconscious but still sending coordinates to coalition forces hunting his squad. Through the window, the garden's automated systems activated for the night cycle. Gentle sprinklers began misting the plants while soft lights provided the illumination that different species needed to survive in the same space. We pulled him out, got him medical attention. Coalition doctors, using coalition technology to save a human soldier who had been killing our troops for hours. Kethfer's compound eyes reflected the garden's lights. When he woke up 3 days later, the first thing he asked wasn't about his injuries. It was, did the coordinates help? Are my boys safe? The veteran's voice grew quiet. That's when I understood. Humans don't fight like soldiers. They fight like every battle is their final stand, because for them, surrender means everyone they love dies. They turn their own bodies into weapons when they have nothing else left. He looked directly at Lisa. A coalition psychologist told me humans evolved as persistence hunters. Creatures that would chase prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. In war, we became their prey, and they would never stop chasing us, never stop adapting, never stop turning whatever they had into whatever they needed, and that's what made them so dangerous. That's what made them unstoppable. The rehabilitation center had settled into its evening rhythm as Kethfer sat in the growing twilight. Outside the windows, the garden's night cycle lighting cast gentle shadows across the mixed collection of plants from dozens of worlds. Human staff members moved quietly through the corridors, checking on patients and preparing for the night shift. The veterans' compound eyes followed their movements, noting how naturally they cared for beings so different from themselves. 20 years, Kethfer said, his translator humming softly in the quiet room. 20 years since the war ended, and I still work here, in this place, trying to understand what we experienced. Lisa glanced at her notes, then looked around the rehabilitation center. You chose to work with human staff after fighting against humans in the war. That seems unusual. Not chose. Needed. Kethfer's mechanical fingers traced the edge of his cup. After the war, most coalition veterans couldn't process what they'd witnessed. We'd been taught that warfare was logical, predictable, mathematical. You apply superior force, the enemy surrenders, everyone goes home, clean and simple. His breathing apparatus cycled through several breaths before he continued. But humans changed those rules. They made war about something else entirely, something that broke most of us who survived. Through the window, Kethfer could see 2 figures in the garden. Mina and Soyoung, now grown women in their late 20s, were working together to tend the night-blooming plants. Their movements were gentle, practiced, as they adjusted moisture levels and checked on seedlings that required constant care. Those are Jinne's daughters, he said quietly, the ones who watched their mother walk into that reactor chamber. They run the horticultural therapy program here, now. Lisa followed his gaze. They work with coalition veterans. They work with anyone who needs healing. Human, alien, civilian, military, it doesn't matter to them. Kethfer's translator crackled slightly. Mina specializes in helping veterans with PTSD. Soyoung develops therapeutic gardens that can support plant life from multiple worlds in the same soil. The veteran's mechanical arm adjusted position with a soft whir. After their mother died, Hyensu brought them here. He thought they might find peace working with beings from the species that had killed Jinne. Instead, they found purpose. The war ended 18 months after Haven Station, Kethfer continued. Not because we defeated humanity, but because Coalition High Command ran the mathematics and realized what total victory would require. Lisa checked her recording device. The official reports say it was a negotiated settlement. The reports lie. The words came out flat, matter of fact. We surrendered. Not in a formal ceremony with signed documents, but in the way that matters. We stopped fighting because we understood what we were really fighting. Kethfer's compound eyes focused on the 2 women in the garden. They were laughing about something, their voices carrying faintly through the window, as they worked together to support a flowering vine that seemed to glow in the artificial light. Every human we killed made the survivors fight harder. Every world we conquered, they turned into a fortress. Every family we threatened, they defended with the fury of dying stars. His translator made a sound like grinding metal. The analysts calculated that defeating humanity completely would require exterminating them entirely. Every man, woman, and child across 67 worlds. Most coalition species couldn't stomach genocide, he continued. Others realized that a universe without humans would be a colder, darker place. Because we'd learned something during those months of fighting that changed everything. Lisa leaned forward. What did you learn? That humans don't fight for territory or resources or strategic advantage. They fight for each other. And when a species weaponizes love itself, Kethfer's voice trailed off as he watched Mina help an elderly Zephyrian veteran with damaged vision navigate between the garden beds. The most terrifying thing about humans isn't their violence, he said finally. It's their capacity to care. They love so deeply that they'll die for strangers, fight impossible odds for people they've never met, and turn their own mortality into a weapon against anyone who threatens what they care about. The veterans' mechanical fingers stopped their rhythmic tapping. After the war, thousands of coalition veterans ended up in facilities like this. PTSD, survivor's guilt, existential trauma. We'd been broken by encountering something that challenged everything we thought we knew about warfare, about survival, about what it means to be alive. And the humans helped you heal. They saved us, Kethver corrected. Not because they had to, not because it was strategic or profitable, but because they saw beings who were suffering and decided to help. Janae died saving coalition soldiers. Along with human civilians, Hyensu brought his daughters here to heal the people who had killed their mother. Through the window, So Young was now teaching a young Centaurian veteran how to propagate seeds from his homeworld. The alien's damaged appendages struggled with the delicate work, but the human woman guided his movements with infinite patience. That's why we surrendered, Kethver said, his voice barely above a whisper. Not because we couldn't kill them all, but because we realized they were worth keeping alive. In a galaxy full of species that fight for dominance and territory, humans fight for each other, and that's something worth protecting. The interview recording clicked off as evening settled over Zephyr Prime. In the garden, human and alien hands worked together, tending plants that shouldn't have been able to grow in the same soil, but somehow thrived when cared for with enough patience and love. The war had ended 20 years ago, but its most important lesson continued growing in rehabilitation centers across the galaxy. Humanity's greatest weapon had never been their technology or their tactics. That had always been their refusal to let anyone suffer alone.